This is something that I'm really excited to share. At the end of last year, we wanted to get as many of the shops together as we could and discuss what happened. 2016, we had a sky is falling moment. A lot of shops started saying things are not well, we're losing, we had a bad quarter, we're not sure what's going on. And so at the Bureau, we wanted to get out there and do some research. Well, our friends at 40 Digits, hey Tim, our friends and Jeffrey, all of 40 Digits is here. So our friends at 40 Digits reached out and said, hey, we were wanting to figure out what happened. We thought we would do some research. And then it turns out they actually have a research group, a research team. Should I call it a division? Yeah, because Jeffrey doesn't like anybody else, so it's a division. So they offered the services of their research team to help us put this together. And thank goodness, because they're professionals. And you'll see that when you see the results. But I just want to thank 40 Digits and also let everybody know this is a service they offer. So if you need good web research, I would definitely hit them up. All right, let's take a look. So we reached out to roughly 600 of the shops that we knew and trusted, and 120 came back and responded to the survey. It was 32 states, 4 provinces in Canada. These companies represented 2,700 plus employees. And the interesting thing, I think, to keep in mind as you look at these results is these are Bureau shops. So they've made a decision that they want to connect and hang out with other shops and get better. And I think that really tells in some of the research that we have. So of the shops, we were kind of scattered, right, when we look at the states. And what we found is that location didn't really matter that much, right? This was the first thing I saw that I was kind of blown away by because I really expected rates and revenue and all this kind of stuff to be bigger on the West Coast. But it turned out it was actually kind of even across. So number of employees, hourly rates, revenue, not really that much related to where a company's hanging out. Industry performance. The sky is not falling. So the first time that the sky fell for me was 2011. And that was when Coy Vin wrote an article about how digital services were dead, right? And he launched a new product company, which folded a few years later, and we're all still in this room. So I think digital services is fine. I think what happens is it feels that way to us. But when we take a look at this, you know, we had it was 65% of the companies reported their revenue increased in 2016. How many shops had, at the end of it, a pretty good 2016? Yeah, right? How many shops during 2016 occasionally went, what the heck is happening? Yeah, right? So this is pretty interesting stuff. And then profitability, well, it was the same situation, right? Over half the respondents reported profits were increasing as well. So 2016, not that bad. I think part of what happens is that we get to this point where clients start to do some of the work in-house that has become a little more commoditized, and they build a team for it. But that only lasts so long. And then there's something new that happens, and they come back out. So I think that's something else that we'll see in the research as we go through. Those that bill more, keep more. I mean, that was kind of what came out of this, right? Increased revenue meant increased profit. Of the 65% companies that said their revenues increased, 70% reported that their profit increased as well. This was pretty eye-opening to me. Only 15% of those shops that said revenue went up, profit went down. I speak to 10 or more shops a week. I would not have believed this slide because everybody was feeling like revenue's up, profit's down, I'm in a weird pull here. I don't know how to get out of it. Work is increasing in scale too, and I think this explains the projects are bigger, right? If a client can't handle it in-house, they're coming back out, and they're finding somebody to help with that work. And if those projects are bigger, it would make sense that the profits are bigger because the onboarding, strategy, all of those things kind of are set. And then you've got that larger part of doing the work. And that's where a lot of the profit comes from because you don't have the repeat of those upfront starts and stops. So that makes a lot of sense as well. but 20%, right, reported that the projects greatly increased, 17% there, and then increased overall 41%. So pretty impressive. This I don't think surprises anybody. There are 5 things that pretty much everybody in this room is doing at some level, right? We've got web development is number 1. And in terms of these, the categories, they were a little bit self-defined by the people that were responding. So when we look at graphic design, some people may be calling that web design. They may be saying, well, this is just, we're doing design, we're not doing development. But if you look across it, I mean, 78% is the lowest when we go 5 out. We're all doing these basic services. But there's some new services that aren't really new. We're just starting to get asked for them a lot more. Digital strategy and mobile app development are on the rise. And because they're on the rise, more of us are starting to offer those services. But popular doesn't mean profitable. When you look at those top 5 things that were asked for, they don't really seem to be the things that people are making money on. And that makes sense, because clients can staff internally for those services, right? But when it comes to digital strategy, that's a tough one. And they probably get to a point where they don't trust the team they hired. That's our saving grace. Eventually, they will no longer educate their own teams. And they'll be like, they don't know what's going on. And then they come back to us. Welcome to ebbs and flows. Increasing revenues led to staffing. Now, this is an interesting one when you look at it. And I will put this slide deck out for everybody. We'll make sure this goes into Slack. But when we look at this, right, 60% of companies hired in 2016. How many people in the room hired in 2016, right? I think this is holding kind of true for the 100-plus shops that we have in here and what we're seeing. But yes, 64% hired, 23% remained the same, and then 13% reduced somewhat or significantly. But only a very small group shut it down significantly. I had 4 shops reach out to me that were really terrified about layoffs. Only one of them ended up having to go through it. And part of that was the Bureau community, because there were other shops that were overloaded, and we were able to connect them together. I think that's part of the promise of the Bureau as well, is helping each other through these rough patches. The other thing I'll say is I think bad news travels fast. So when somebody is facing that, everybody hears about it, and I think we project ourselves into that situation. I think that's the kind of thing that could be happening to us, and we start looking for those negative parts of our companies. Staffing was mixed for reasons. Now, this is really interesting, right? Many just grew. It wasn't like there was suddenly a bigger project or they had new clients. It was just what they currently had got bigger. And so they hired for it. And I just think that's really interesting. Digital project managers are the hotness right now. Who in the room's looking for a digital project manager? Yeah? Okay, well, maybe everybody else found them. I don't know. But that's what we see show up a lot on people who are out there looking to fill a position, digital PMs. We're now starting to see developers come back in. This is another thing when we look at this research. We have this opportunity to continue doing research and finding out more to help everybody forecast. And it's only been a trickle that's been coming in, but we're going to start opening it up to try to get a lot more information from everybody. 75% of revenue came from existing clients. That was pretty amazing to me. I think there's a little bit of a danger here in that sometimes we hold on to legacy clients that we have to let go. They don't know who we are anymore. They don't appreciate what it is we do. Maybe things have moved on. Also, sometimes they hold our rates back, right? But we love them because they helped us through that patch 3 years ago. And so we feel a sense of responsibility. But I think there are also other shops that probably could use those legacy clients. They're probably in the right position for them. So I think that's another thing we can look at as we start to bring the community together, is how can we offboard a client without it feeling so crappy, right? All right, I got to talk to y'all about this one. Oh, man. I called Jeffrey, who led the research, and I was just like, you got to check this again. Because, quick question, how many people hate RFPs? Yeah, all right, why are we responding to them? Well, because we need the work, right? We want that work. So I feel that there's so many of us trying to fix this problem. Hell, Tracy, where are you at? Where's Tracy? I saw her. Tracy, we were out at Captive Island. You remember we were sitting out there, super windy out there, and everybody was like, let's fix RFPs. And we had great conversations and stuff, and they still suck. We didn't do it, right? But we started the conversation. Ken, HR, they sent out a survey recently trying to find out more about RFPs. I think this is a huge opportunity for us as the Bureau. I think it's an opportunity for all of us to come together and say, what is it that we feel should be in RFPs? What is it we feel should be asked for? How should it be asked for? And as we do get bigger, while we're maintaining these relationships, we'll start to have the authority to start calling things industry standards, right? Look at what AIGA did with their creative services contract. A lot of us starting our shops even went over and got that, right? So I think this is a huge opportunity for us to really make a difference in RFPs, get it out there, promote it, and start standing by what we said. And then maybe we won't hate them so much, and I won't be quite so shocked. Then we look at new business. So the majority of this slide is looking at basically the effort that went into a new business proposal, new business pitch, and how successful it was, right? So what we find is that small shops don't have to put as much effort in. Well, they probably, and small is being defined based on number of employees, so there's a little bit of a fallacy in that, right? I mean, there's some small shops that do amazing work. I mean, Chromatic is one of them, right? You guys necessarily don't have a huge team, but you probably don't have to pitch that much if you're going against other shops the same size. So this isn't really that surprising. Medium shops, you know, a little bit more, and then large shops the most. But then what we find out is that it was the project size, really, right? Small shops, less than 10 employees, on average, $10,000, almost $11,000. That was the minimum project size that they would entertain, which makes sense because their overhead's probably lower. They can do those projects. Medium, 11 to 25, roughly $20,000. And then large, $45,000. You get to a point where you know you're going to lose if you're a certain size, and you just avoid those projects. Now, to talk about the numbers in terms of how the groups are broken up, this was based mainly on the responses, right, Jeffrey? So this was how we could break it up. But I think what's really interesting here is in the industry, and I've heard this from a lot of people, Kelly Goto was the first person who told me, was that when you go past 20, you have to grow really fast because all of your systems start to fall apart, right? The way that you did things when you were fewer than 10, the way that you did things when you were 11 to 20, they don't work anymore. You suddenly have more people that you need in there, and you start to bring them in from the outside, or you try to elevate people up, and you end up with gaps and all these kind of things. For whatever reason, when you get past 50, your culture, everything shifts. And suddenly you may be a different company, but you don't have the same scary moments that you have when you're in between there. So it was interesting to me that it actually broke out this way, because I think that 25 plus is kind of a scary place to be until you get to 50, and then you're fine. Large company, higher rates, makes sense. But the problem is the effective billing rate, right? We're out there and we know what we're trying to charge, but then when we back in and look at the effective billing rate, it's not there. Jody talks about this quite a bit. We've got a webinar on the community site where he goes into it. But look at the medium shops. Look at that gap. Oh my goodness, it feels good when we sign that agreement, but what happened when the invoice went out, right? And then you start to look at all your costs and everything, and it's not quite where it needs to be. Wow, I didn't see this one coming. What is your preferred model for pricing services capability? Now, we're going to have a pricing debate later with Rob Haar and Dan Mall. Well, neither of them are going to defend retainers, and that's number one. right? People are like, we like retainers, but don't tell anybody, because we don't say it publicly. Time and materials, number 2. Rob, you can use that, right? Package, so if you're selling a set amount of work for a set cost, so if it's a number of templates, or it could be a team for a week, that sort of thing. So then you get into value-based, lump sum, performance-based. What I see when I look at this is those top 3 are known. There are no questions, right? Retainer, I know what I'm getting paid, and I know what I'm putting out. Time and materials, I did the work, you're paying me the money, right? And then package, this is what you're buying, this is what I'm taking. But then when you get to value-based, lump sum, the rest of them, it's a little unknown, right? If you're good at it, it can be really profitable. But a lot of us go back to what we know. And also I'll say, those top 3 are more of an industry standard. These are other things that clients are seeing, so they're comfortable with it. Whereas value-based can be really tough to explain. But Dan's got a great book on it, so you should read the book. Now let's take a look at some of the insights that the 40 Digits team found. What's the state of culture, and how did it shift in 2016? Well, I'll say it. If you responded to the survey, if you come to these events, you care. So 9 out of 10 companies reported their internal culture was strong or very strong. I was listening to the Freakonomics podcast at one point, and they said, if you're a new parent and you're going to the bookstore to buy 5 books on being a good parent, you don't need to buy the books. You're going to be a good parent because you care. So it's the same thing here, I think, is what we're seeing. And we feel that our cultures are getting better, right? 65% of companies reported their culture improved in 2016, even with some bad patches, right? Some of the shops I've talked to, I think their culture improved because of the rough patches. I think they came together more and they realized they wanted to stay together, they wanted to work through it. So I think, and we all know the benefits of a strong culture. Does vertical specialization result in better performance? Man, I was wrong on this one. I'm like, I don't know. I really thought vertical specialists would have been much higher. But it turns out it's kind of hard to tell, right? So if you're focusing exclusively on higher ed or healthcare or anything of that nature, it's not really making that big of a difference in terms of your profit compared to shops that are more generalists, right? Everybody's kind of in that same flow. Specialization doesn't mean change. You know what? What works, works. When responsive hits, it's not like suddenly higher ed doesn't want responsive, right? So when new services come in that make sense for people, that gets pretty much distributed across both vertical specialized shops as well as generalist shops. But this is nice, right? If you have a vertical specialization, you get to charge more. I think that's a good reason, right? But average minimum project price, $8,000 higher. Not bad. Now, does service specialization result in better performance, right? If I focus exclusively on healthcare, am I able to do better on those projects? So, specialization in this definition means you offer at least half of the services available in a category. And this is service specialization, so I apologize. This is if you focus on content or development, design, research, strategy. So if I am a specialist offering one of these services, will I do better? Yeah, if you pick the right ones, right? Research wins on profit. It is answering a question for a client they don't know, and that is very valuable. So when you take a look at this, and I mean, it's pretty much a no-brainer, and I think we'll all start to see profit being offered. We'll see profit being offered more and more. Everybody, profit. We'll see research offered more and more, right? It's going to be in the language on the websites. It's going to be in the pitches. It's going to be in all that. Now, the other thing is, it's a little bit scary because a lot of times we have things like content strategy as an example, where it's easy to say, And we can even kind of fake it when we're in the pitch. But then when you have to do it, you're like, oh, shit, does anybody have a book? Right? You're like, I want to make sure I'm doing this right because we sold it. Full service ain't what it used to be. So half of the companies, over half of all companies specialize in 3 or more service categories. So again, this would be content strategy, web development, research. But if you have a lot of categories, it's really not an impact on profit, right? If you're offering a few, if you're specializing in a couple, or if you're offering 8, your profit's kind of still going to be the same across. But more service offerings attract new clients. So this is huge, right? It's not a significant number of new clients, but if you're looking to expand out your client base, start thinking about new services you can offer, right? It'll probably help you with your existing customers as well, but it'll attract new customers in to take a look at what you're doing. Do successful companies prefer different pricing models? Yep, retainer. Again, didn't see that coming, right? Packaging it up, saying this is exactly what you'll get, this is the cost. And to compare packaged with lump sum or fixed bid. Fixed bid, you're saying, I will deliver this thing for this cost, but you don't know all the steps in between. Package is saying, I will send you 5 templates and you will pay me $50,000, which isn't a bad rate. If anybody needs templates, call me. I'll do it. Do specific service categories correlate with higher rates? Yeah, right? The more strategic services a company offers, the higher their average and effective rate. Strategy wins. But here's the amazing thing. For each one of those strategic services provided, they were able to raise their effective bill rate by $16 an hour for each one, right? So this is another thing to look at when we start, especially those middle-sized companies. You're trying to fix that effective bill rate versus what your hourly rate is. And I know some people are doing things different ways, but if you were to break it down and try to look at it, strategic services are definitely going to play a role. What's going on with the poorer performing companies? Well, bigger projects are the key to higher profitability. So when we take the look at some of the companies that aren't doing as well, they're not getting those larger projects, right? If we look at profit decrease in work scale, look at remain the same, 38%, decreased 28%. But look at profit increase in work scale, increased, greatly increased, right? 80%. So we need to be getting larger projects, even if it's from those 75% existing clients. That's a big key. Revenue impacts profit a lot, right? The more revenue, the more profit. This is being shown out across the board. And effective hourly rates are key. Jody, you're right. Okay, are you happy? You're right. It's very rare I tell Jody he's right about anything. But this is the key. We've got to get our effective billable rates up. Performance difference, right? Forecasting makes a difference. If you're good at forecasting, you can make better predictions. This is something that the Bureau is working with Summit CPA on. Summit CPA is working on a dashboard. And how many shops are in it right now, Jody? 20-ish? And so basically this dashboard, if you're willing to give 2 years of financials and update it quarterly, we'll figure out, we're able to use this dashboard to show how shops like you are doing. You can look at it based on number of employees in a range. You can look at it based on, are you agile, are you waterfall? You can look at it, are you specialized, right? Either based in a service category or based in an industry category. So, am I saying it wrong, Jody? Okay, good. He was like, we didn't do that. Don't sell that. But anyway, this is something that's being worked on because if we can share how others are doing now, we can see that, hey, we had a blip, we had a bad spot, but so did other shops like us. So maybe it's not us. Maybe what we're doing is fine. We just need to find a new way to get out there and find more business. Really, Jeffrey? Really? So this is where I actually disagree with Jeffrey because he said 4 out of 34. But the reality is only one person here likes me. Thanks for being awesome, Woot Carl. I know who you are. But the others are just, they're not talking about me. It was horrible. So that is our State of the Industry report. And I want to thank 40 Digits again. Give them some applause.